9-year-old boy carried his injured 5-year-old sister 2 miles to the hospital in the middle of the night. When doctors asked how she got those injuries, his answer made the entire ER staff freeze and call 911. The kitchen clock ticked steadily in the modest apartment on Maple Street, its sound punctuating the silence as Jackson Hayes carefully spread peanut butter onto wheat bread. His small fingers worked with practiced precision, making sure to reach the corners of each slice. At 9 years old, Jackson moved with the deliberate focus of someone much older, his deep brown eyes occasionally darting to the kitchen doorway to check on his 5-year-old sister, Violet, who sat cross-legged on the living room floor, absorbed in a coloring book. "Just a minute, Vi," he called, using the nickname only he was allowed to use. "I'm cutting the crusts off like you like." October sunlight filtered weakly through the kitchen window, illuminating the worn linoleum floor and catching on the dust motes that danced in the air. The apartment was clean but threadbare, furniture showing years of use, walls in need of fresh paint, but decorated with crayon drawings taped at child height, bringing color to the faded beige walls. Jackson grabbed a knife from the drawer and carefully trimmed the crusts from Violet's sandwich, placing them on his own plate. His mother had taught him never to waste food. He couldn't remember when he'd started making their after-school snacks. It seemed like he'd always done it. His mother, Rachel, worked at the local diner during the day and cleaned offices at night, leaving little time for anything beyond exhausted hugs and hurried meals between shifts. "Jackson," Violet's small voice called out. "Can I have apple slices too?" "We're out of apples," he replied, opening the refrigerator and scanning its meager contents. "But there's half an orange left. I can cut that up for you." The refrigerator light illuminated his serious face, highlighting cheekbones that seemed too prominent for a child. Jackson wasn't tall for his age, but he was lean and wiry, with a quiet strength that came from responsibility rather than play. His dark hair fell across his forehead as he reached for the orange, and he pushed it back with a habitual gesture. "I don't want orange," Violet pouted, appearing in the doorway. Unlike her brother's composed demeanor, Violet Hayes was all motion and expression. Her light brown hair was perpetually escaping from its ponytail, framing a face dominated by wide blue eyes, a genetic echo of the father who had walked out 3 years ago. She wore mismatched socks, one pink and one purple, beneath a pair of hand-me-down overalls that Jackson's teacher had given him when her own daughter outgrew them. "It's orange or nothing, Vi," Jackson said with the patient firmness of someone who had navigated many such negotiations. "Mom won't get paid until Friday, so we have to make everything last." Violet sighed dramatically but nodded. "Okay, but can you make it into smiles like Mom does?" Jackson's face softened. "Sure thing," as he sliced the orange into crescent shapes, arranging them into a smile on Violet's plate. The sound of a key turning in the front door made both children look up. Their mother wasn't due home for hours, which meant, "Hey, kiddos!" Michael's voice boomed through the apartment. "Where's my favorite little family?" Jackson's shoulders tensed almost imperceptibly. Violet, however, dropped her crayon and ran toward the voice, her face lighting up. "Michael, we're having snacks." Jackson made sandwiches. Michael Reynolds appeared in the kitchen doorway, one hand holding a plastic bag, the other scooping up Violet and spinning her around. He was a tall man in his mid-30s with an easy smile and the kind of good looks that came from regular gym visits rather than genetic fortune. His short-sleeved shirt revealed muscular arms decorated with a sleeve of tattoos, and his blonde hair was styled in a way that suggested he cared about his appearance. "Well, if it isn't the man of the house," Michael said, setting Violet down and ruffling Jackson's hair with a hand that lingered just a moment too long, fingers gripping slightly before releasing. "Always taking care of everyone, aren't you, buddy?" Jackson ducked away from the touch, mumbling something about finishing the snacks. He felt Michael's eyes follow him as he moved back to the counter. "I brought treats," Michael announced, holding up the plastic bag. "Ice cream and those cheese crackers you like, Violet." "Mom says we're supposed to eat healthy snacks after school," Jackson said quietly, not looking up from the plates he was preparing. Michael's smile remained fixed, but something flickered in his eyes. a momentary hardening quickly disguised as he turned to Violet. "Well, maybe just this once we can break the rules, right, Princess? Our secret from Mom." Violet nodded eagerly, but Jackson noted how easily Michael undermined their mother's rules. It had been happening more frequently in the 3 months since Michael had started dating Rachel. Small permissions given that contradicted established boundaries, little secrets kept from Mom. Jackson had tried mentioning it once, but his mother had sighed and told him he should be grateful that Michael was taking an interest in them at all. "Not many men want to date a woman with 2 kids, she'd said, the weariness in her voice making Jackson feel like a burden. "Michael is good to us. He brings groceries sometimes and he fixed the bathroom sink. We need to appreciate that, Jackson." Now, watching Michael lift Violet onto a kitchen chair and open the box of ice cream, Jackson felt the familiar knot form in his stomach. On the surface, Michael was everything his mother wanted: charming, helpful, and seemingly devoted. But when Rachel wasn't around, something in Michael's demeanor shifted. Nothing dramatic enough to name, just a tightening around his eyes when Violet made too much noise, or the way his compliments to Jackson often felt like subtle criticisms. "You're so serious for a kid," Michael would say, shaking his head. "Don't you ever just want to have fun instead of acting like a little old man?" Jackson placed the plates on the table, careful to avoid Michael's outstretched legs. "We're supposed to do homework after snack." Michael spooned ice cream into a bowl for Violet. "Homework can wait. I thought we could watch that new superhero movie I downloaded. Your mom said she'd be home late again tonight, so it's just us." His eyes met Jackson's. One big happy family. The phrase hung in the air, a declaration that felt more like a threat than a promise. Jackson looked at Violet, happily digging into her ice cream, completely at ease with Michael. His sister trusted easily, seeing only the surface of people, the smiles, the presence, the attention. But Jackson had learned early to look deeper, to notice patterns, to sense the hidden currents beneath pleasant words. "I really should finish my math homework," Jackson insisted, sitting down and taking a bite of his sandwich, crust edges and all. Michael's jaw tightened briefly before relaxing into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Always the responsible one. Tell you what, bud. You do your homework while Violet and I start the movie, and you can join us when you're done." Before Jackson could respond, the apartment phone rang. An old landline that Rachel kept for emergencies because it was cheaper than cell phone minutes. Michael answered it, his voice shifting into the charming tone he used with Rachel. "Hey, babe. Yeah, just got here. The kids? They're great, having a snack. No trouble at all. You know I love spending time with them." Jackson watched Michael's face as he spoke, the way he became completely believable in an instant. Rachel had been hesitant at first about leaving Michael to watch them, but over the past few weeks, it had become more frequent as her hours at the diner increased and Michael positioned himself as the helpful boyfriend willing to step in. "Don't worry about rushing home," Michael was saying. "I've got everything under control here. Take the extra shift if they need you. We'll be fine." When he hung up, Michael turned to Jackson with a smile that felt like a challenge. "Your mom's staying late at the diner. They're short-staffed, and she could use the extra money." He reached into the refrigerator and pulled out a beer. "Looks like it's just us kids tonight." The clock on the wall continued its steady ticking, marking time in a rhythm that suddenly felt too fast and too slow simultaneously. Jackson looked at Violet, then at Michael, and felt the invisible weight on his small shoulders grow just a little bit heavier. "I'll help Violet with her homework after the movie," he said finally, his voice quiet but firm. Michael popped the beer open, the sharp hiss cutting through the kitchen. "Sure thing, buddy. Whatever you say." He took a long drink, his eyes never leaving Jackson's face. "After all, we're a team now, right?" Outside, the October sky began to darken early, shadows lengthening across the apartment. Jackson gathered his math book and worksheets, positioning himself at the kitchen table where he could keep Violet in his line of sight as she settled on the couch next to Michael, completely unaware of the subtle current of tension in the room. Jackson worked methodically through his multiplication problems, the numbers offering a comforting predictability that the rest of his life increasingly lacked. Through the kitchen doorway, He could see Michael's arm draped across the back of the couch behind Violet, his sister's small form leaning trustingly against the man's side as the movie played. Everything looked normal, even nice. A scene from the family life that Rachel desperately wanted. But as Jackson watched Michael check his phone and take another long drink of beer, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, that beneath the surface of this ordinary evening, currents were moving that might pull them all under. He pressed his pencil harder against the paper, focusing on the one thing he could control, the correct answer to 7 times 8. The evening progressed with a deceptive normalcy that Jackson had come to recognize as the calm before a storm. Michael ordered pizza for dinner. "Don't tell your mom I didn't cook that casserole she left." And by the time they'd finished eating, he was on his 4th beer. Jackson had learned to track Michael's drinking with careful attention, noting how his voice got louder and his movements less precise with each can. Violet, oblivious to the subtle shifts in the atmosphere, chattered happily about her day at kindergarten, how she'd been chosen to feed the class hamster, and how her teacher had praised her drawing of their family, which now included Michael standing next to their mother. "That's real sweet, princess," Michael said, his words slightly stretched at the edges. "I'm glad someone in this family appreciates having me around." Jackson felt the comment like a jab, but kept his expression neutral as he cleared the pizza box and paper plates from the coffee table. In the kitchen, he took longer than necessary, using the worn dish towel to methodically wipe down the already clean counters. Through the doorway, he could hear Michael changing the TV to a sports channel, the volume rising with each passing minute. When Jackson returned to the living room, Violet was sitting on the floor with her coloring supplies spread around her. She looked up at him with bright eyes. "Will you color with me, Jackson?" she asked, holding out a crayon. "I'm making a picture for Mom." Before he could answer, Michael interjected. "Let your brother be, Violet. Why don't you draw something for me instead?" He reached for another beer, frowning when he found the 6-pack empty. Jackson checked the fridge. "There should be more beer." "I think that was the last one," Jackson said carefully, well aware there was another 6-pack hidden behind the vegetables. His mother had started hiding alcohol after noticing how quickly it disappeared when Michael visited. Michael's eyes narrowed. "Just check, would you?" Jackson reluctantly went to the kitchen, standing for a moment with his hand on the refrigerator door, debating. If he revealed the hidden beer, his mother would be upset. If he didn't, he opened the refrigerator and moved the bag of carrots aside, revealing the 6-pack behind it. "Found some," he called, his voice flat. Michael appeared in the doorway, his large frame blocking the light. "Thought so." He took the beer from Jackson, their fingers brushing in a way that made the boy pull back instinctively. Michael noticed. "You've got a real attitude problem, kid. Your mom works her ass off for you, and I'm just trying to help out. The least you could do is show some respect." "I do respect my mom," Jackson said quietly, backing up a step. Michael popped open a new can. "But not me, right? That's pretty obvious." He took a long drink, then wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Your mom thinks you're so mature and responsible, but I see how you look at me when she's not around. Like you think you're better than me or something." Jackson looked down at the linoleum floor, focusing on a crack near the baseboard. "I should check on Violet." Michael moved to block his path. "We're talking, Jackson. It's rude to walk away when adults are talking to you." The man's voice had taken on that hard edge that always made Jackson's heart beat faster. He recognized the danger signs. The flushed face, the tightening around Michael's mouth, the way he leaned slightly forward, invading Jackson's space. "I'm sorry," Jackson said automatically, the words a shield he'd learned to deploy. Michael studied him for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Just remember who the adult is around here when your mom's gone." Jackson slipped past him, returning to the living room where Violet remained absorbed in her coloring, humming softly to herself. He sat down beside her, picking up a blue crayon and beginning to color the sky in her picture. Outside, the first drops of rain began to patter against the windows, matching the nervous rhythm of his heart. "Is Michael mad?" Violet whispered, not looking up from her drawing. "No, he's fine," Jackson lied, keeping his voice steady. He's just watching the game. Violet nodded, accepting his answer with the complete trust that made Jackson feel both proud and terrified. His sister depended on him, looked to him for security and guidance when their mother wasn't around. It was a responsibility he had never questioned, never resented. It was simply who he was, who he had to be. The evening wore on, Michael alternating between moments of forced joviality, usually directed at Violet, and brooding silence punctuated by commentary on the basketball game. By 8 o'clock, Violet was yawning, her head drooping over her coloring book. "Time for bed, Vi," Jackson said, gathering her crayons and helping her to her feet. "I want to wait for Mommy," she protested weakly, rubbing her eyes. "Mom won't be home until really late," Jackson explained gently. "You can see her in the morning." Michael, who had been scrolling through his phone, looked up. "I'll tuck her in. You clean up this mess." Something in his tone made Jackson hesitate. "It's okay. I always help her get ready for bed. She has a whole routine." Michael stood, towering over both children. "I said I'll do it. Part of being a family is letting other people help out." His words were friendly, but his expression wasn't. "Isn't that right, Violet? You want me to read you a story?" Violet, too young and too tired to sense the undercurrents, nodded and took Michael's offered hand. "Can you read the bunny book?" "Whatever you want, princess." Michael led her toward the bedroom she shared with Jackson, but not before giving the boy a look that clearly said, "Stay put." Jackson quickly gathered the coloring supplies and straightened the living room, his ears straining to hear the interaction in the bedroom. He could make out Michael's deeper voice, occasionally interrupted by Violet's higher-pitched questions. After about 10 minutes, Michael emerged, closing the bedroom door behind him. "She's asking for you," he said flatly. "Apparently, I don't do the voices right." Relief washed over Jackson. "I'll go tuck her in." "Wait." Michael grabbed his arm as he passed, the grip firm enough to make Jackson wince. "We need to establish some ground rules here, buddy. Your mom and I are getting pretty serious, and that means I'm going to be around a lot more. If you keep up this attitude, it's just going to make things difficult for everyone, especially your mom. She doesn't need the stress. You understand?" Jackson nodded, his eyes fixed on Michael's hand around his arm. "I can't hear you," Michael said, his fingers tightening slightly. "I understand," Jackson replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Michael released him, his demeanor shifting abruptly as he ruffled Jackson's hair with forced affection. "Good talk, buddy. Now go say goodnight to your sister. I'm going to work on my laptop for a bit." Jackson hurried to the bedroom, closing the door with quiet deliberation before going to Violet's bed. She was barely awake, her eyelids heavy. "Jackson," she murmured, "you didn't do the goodnight song." He sat on the edge of her bed and stroked her hair. "I'm here now. I'll sing it." In a soft voice, he sang the simple lullaby their mother had taught them, about stars watching over sleeping children. Violet's eyes drifted closed before he finished, her breathing becoming deep and regular. Jackson sat there a moment longer, watching her innocent face in the glow of the night light. "I'll always take care of you, Vi," he whispered, a promise made and renewed each night. No matter what. He changed into his pajamas and climbed into his own bed across the small room, but sleep remained elusive. Through the thin walls, he could hear Michael moving around the apartment, the sound of another beer being opened, the volume of the TV rising and falling. Jackson stared at the ceiling, counting the glow-in-the-dark stars he had arranged in the shape of constellations. His science teacher, Mrs. Bennett, had given him the stars after he'd shown interest in her astronomy lesson. "You'll look at real stars someday, Jackson," she had told him. "There's a whole universe waiting for you outside of Millbrook." On nights like this, that universe seemed impossibly distant. Jackson's world had shrunk to this apartment, to protecting Violet, to navigating the unpredictable terrain of Michael's moods. He wondered what his mother saw in Michael that made her willing to invite him into their lives. She seemed happier sometimes, laughing at Michael's jokes, looking less tired when he brought dinner or helped with household repairs. But other times, Jackson caught her watching Michael with an apprehensive expression, quickly masked when she noticed her son's attention. He was still awake when he heard the front door open around 11 o'clock. His mother's quiet greeting to Michael, their muted conversation. He couldn't make out the words, but the tones told him enough. Michael's voice solicitous and warm, his mother's tired but appreciative. Jackson closed his eyes, pretending to be asleep when Rachel quietly opened the bedroom door to check on them. She approached his bed, and he felt her gentle hand brush the hair from his forehead, her lips pressing a soft kiss to his temple. "Sweet dreams, my brave boy," she whispered, the familiar words both comfort and burden. Jackson kept his breathing deep and regular until she moved to Violet's bed, repeating the nighttime ritual before slipping back out of the room. Only then did he open his eyes, blinking away the unexpected moisture that had gathered there. Outside, the rain continued to fall, a steady patter against the window that finally lulled him into an uneasy sleep. His last conscious thought a silent plea that tomorrow would be better, easier, safer for all of them. But even in sleep, some part of him remained vigilant, listening, waiting, carrying an invisible weight that no 9-year-old should have to bear. The next 2 weeks passed in a delicate balance of tension and normalcy in the Hayes household. Rachel picked up additional shifts at the diner, which meant Michael's presence became increasingly common in the evenings. For Jackson, each day felt like navigating a minefield. Certain topics, movements, or even expressions seemed to trigger Michael's irritation. Yet the man maintained his charming facade whenever Rachel was around. On this particular Thursday evening, Jackson stood at the apartment window watching fat raindrops race down the glass, tracing their erratic paths with his finger. October had brought colder temperatures to Millbrook, and the sky had been leaden all day, finally unleashing a steady downpour as dusk approached. Behind him, Violet sat at the kitchen table coloring while Michael lounged on the couch, his attention divided between his laptop and the sports highlights playing on TV. "Jackson," Rachel called from the hallway where she was hurriedly putting on her coat. "I left money for pizza on the counter. Make sure Violet finishes her homework before she watches any TV. Okay?" Jackson turned from the window. "When will you be home, Mom?" Rachel paused, her expression a mixture of guilt and resignation. "Not until late, sweetie. Mr. Patterson asked if I could clean the medical offices tonight since Donna called in sick. It's extra money we really need right now." She approached him, placing her hands on his shoulders. "I know it's a lot to ask of you." "It's fine," Jackson said automatically, though his stomach tightened at the thought of another long evening with Michael. Rachel searched his face. "You sure you're okay? You've been so quiet lately." Before Jackson could respond, Michael appeared beside them, draping an arm around Rachel's shoulders. "He's fine, babe. Probably just tired from school. Don't worry. I've got everything under control here." Rachel leaned into Michael gratefully. "I don't know what I'd do without you these days." "That's what I'm here for," Michael replied, kissing her cheek. "Now get going before you're late. We'll hold down the fort." Jackson watched the interaction with the uncomfortable feeling that he was witnessing a performance, at least on Michael's part. The way the man's expression changed when Rachel turned away, the subtle tightening of his jaw, the calculating look that passed over his face as he checked his watch. "Come give me a hug, Violet," Rachel called, and the little girl bounded over, wrapping her arms around her mother's waist. "Can we have ice cream for dessert?" Violet asked hopefully. Rachel smoothed her daughter's hair. "Not tonight, honey. It's a school night. But maybe this weekend we can go to that new place by the park. Okay?" Violet nodded, clearly disappointed but used to delayed gratifications. Rachel kissed the top of her head, then turned to Jackson, pulling him into a tight hug. "You're my rock," she whispered in his ear, the words both a comfort and a burden. Then she was gone, the apartment door closing behind her with a soft click that somehow felt like the ceiling of a vault. Michael's demeanor shifted immediately. He walked to the kitchen, opening the refrigerator and pulling out a beer. "So pizza, huh? How about we order something better? Chinese, maybe?" "Mom left money specifically for pizza," Jackson said, following him into the kitchen. Michael popped the tab on his beer. Well, I've got money for Chinese. And I've had a long day. So I'm in the mood for something better than greasy pizza. Jackson stood his ground, feeling his heart rate increase but keeping his voice steady. Violet really likes the pizza from Antonio's. It's her favorite. Michael took a long drink, his eyes never leaving Jackson's face. Always the difficult one, aren't you? He set his beer down with careful deliberation. Fine. Pizza it is. Call it in while I finish up some work. Jackson reached for the phone, relieved at the small victory but aware that it might have consequences later. As he dialed the familiar number, he watched Michael return to his laptop, typing with more force than necessary, his shoulders tense beneath his t-shirt. The evening progressed with superficial calm. They ate pizza in front of the TV, Violet chattering about her day at school, oblivious to the undercurrent of tension. Jackson helped her with her simple kindergarten homework, practicing writing the letter M and identifying rhyming words, while Michael alternated between working on his laptop and checking his phone, his beer can perpetually in hand. By 7:30, Jackson had helped Violet shower and change into pajamas. He was reading her a bedtime story when Michael appeared in the doorway of their bedroom. Early bedtime tonight? Jackson looked up from the book. She has a field trip tomorrow. Mom wanted her to get extra sleep. Michael leaned against the doorframe. Always following the rules, aren't you, Jackson? His words were casual, but there was something in his tone that made Jackson's skin prickle. Finish up. I need to use your mom's laptop, and I can't find the charger for mine. Jackson nodded, turning back to the story. He was acutely aware of Michael's presence, the way the man's eyes lingered on them both, the slight sway in his posture that suggested he'd had more than just the beers Jackson had counted. When Violet was finally asleep, Jackson carefully extracted himself from her bed and turned on her night light, a globe that projected stars onto the ceiling. He stepped into the hallway, closing the bedroom door partway, the way Violet preferred it. Michael was in the living room, Rachel's laptop open on the coffee table in front of him. Several empty beer cans stood beside it, more than Jackson had realized. Michael's face was flushed, his movements less precise as he typed. Come here, Michael said, gesturing to Jackson. Need to ask you something. Reluctantly, Jackson approached, maintaining what he hoped was a safe distance. What is it? Your mom mentioned something about a school form for a field trip. Said I should sign it since she'd be at work. Michael's words slurred slightly at the edges. Where is it? I already put it in my backpack. Mom signed it this morning before she left for work. Michael's expression darkened. So she didn't trust me to do it? No, it's not. Don't lie to me. Michael cut him off, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. She specifically told me she wanted me to sign it. Like I'm part of this family now. But you probably told her not to let me, didn't you? Jackson took a small step backward. I didn't say anything about the form to Mom. She just signed it when she made breakfast. Michael studied him, then suddenly smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. You know what your problem is, Jackson? You think you're the man of the house. But you're just a kid. A skinny little kid who needs to learn his place. Jackson remained silent, years of navigating his alcoholic father's moods, having taught him when speaking only made things worse. Michael turned back to the laptop, clearly dismissing him. Go do your homework or something. I'm trying to work here. Relieved at the reprieve, Jackson retreated to the kitchen table with his science textbook. He tried to focus on the chapter about the water cycle, but his attention kept drifting to Michael, monitoring the man's movements and mood from the corner of his eye. Raindrops continued to pelt the window, and thunder rumbled in the distance. Jackson checked the wall clock. Not quite 8:30. His mother wouldn't be home until after midnight. The apartment felt smaller somehow, the storm outside adding to the sense of confinement. For nearly an hour, they existed in parallel. Jackson at the kitchen table with his homework, Michael on the couch with his beer and Rachel's laptop. The only sounds were the rain, the occasional rumble of thunder, and the clacking of keyboard keys punctuated by Michael's increasingly frequent sighs of frustration. Piece of garbage, Michael muttered after one such sigh, glaring at the screen. Keeps freezing up on me. Jackson said nothing, carefully turning a page in his textbook. Hey! Michael called, his voice sharper now. I'm talking to you. This laptop keeps crashing. What gives? Jackson looked up cautiously. Sometimes it does that. Mom says it's really old. Well, it's costing me money. I've got work to finish tonight. Michael ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Get me another beer. Jackson hesitated only a moment before standing and going to the refrigerator. He counted 4 beers remaining in the 6-pack. Michael had already had at least 5, possibly more. Jackson took one, closing the refrigerator door carefully. As he approached the couch, Violet's small voice called from the bedroom. Jackson, I had a bad dream. Michael's eyes narrowed. Tell her to go back to sleep. She gets scared after nightmares, Jackson explained, setting the beer on the coffee table. I'll just be a minute. I said tell her to go back to sleep, Michael repeated, his voice hardening. She needs to learn to self-soothe or whatever they call it. Jackson stood frozen, caught between 2 imperatives. She's only 5. For God's sake, Michael muttered, pushing himself up from the couch with obvious irritation. I'll handle it. Alarm bells rang in Jackson's mind. No, I'll go. But Michael was already striding toward the bedroom, his movements unsteady but purposeful. Jackson followed quickly, his heart pounding. In the dim glow of the night light, Violet sat up in bed, her hair tousled and her eyes wide with residual fear from her dream. When she saw Michael enter instead of her brother, she shrank back slightly against her pillow. I want Jackson, she said in a small voice. Michael loomed over her bed. Your brother's busy. You need to go back to sleep. Violet's lower lip trembled. But I had a scary dream about monsters. There's no such thing as monsters, Michael said dismissively. Lie down and close your eyes. Jackson stepped into the room. Vi, I'm right here. It's okay. Michael turned sharply. I told you I'd handle this. I know, but nothing. Go finish your homework. Jackson stood his ground, something in him refusing to leave Violet alone with Michael in this state. I always help her after nightmares. She falls back asleep faster if I'm here. The look that crossed Michael's face then was chilling. A flash of pure rage quickly masked but unmistakable. He took a step toward Jackson, his voice dropping to a whisper too low for Violet to hear. You're really pushing me tonight, kid. One more word, and we're gonna have a serious problem. Understand? The threat hung in the air between them. Jackson glanced at Violet, who was watching them with confusion and growing fear, then back at Michael. Slowly, he nodded and backed out of the room. Good choice, Michael said, his voice returning to a normal volume as he turned back to Violet. Now lie down and go to sleep. No more drama. Violet obediently lay back, pulling her blanket up to her chin, but her eyes remained fixed on the doorway where Jackson stood, silently pleading. The sight of her fear tore at him. Can I at least get her some water? He asked quietly. It helps her calm down. Michael's shoulders tensed, but after a moment he stepped away from the bed. Fine. Make it quick. Jackson hurried to the kitchen, filling Violet's favorite cup with water. When he returned to the bedroom, Michael had moved to the window, staring out at the storm while Violet lay rigid in her bed, clearly still frightened. Here you go, Vi, Jackson said softly, approaching her bed. As he handed her the cup, he whispered, It's okay. Just try to sleep. I'll be right in the other room. Violet took a small sip, her eyes never leaving his face. Will you sing the star song? She whispered back. Before Jackson could answer, Michael turned from the window. No songs. Just drink your water and go to sleep. His tone left no room for argument. He pointed at Jackson. You. Now. Jackson gave Violet's hand a quick squeeze, trying to convey reassurance, then reluctantly left the room. Michael followed, closing the door more firmly than necessary behind them. In the living room, Michael grabbed his beer from the coffee table and took a long drink. You know what your problem is, Jackson? You baby her too much. Kids need to learn to be tough. She's just little. Jackson said, unable to keep the defensive note from his voice. Michael's eyes hardened. And you're what? Some kind of child development expert? He gave a humorless laugh. Let me tell you something. I grew up with a dad who believed in discipline. When I had nightmares, you know what he did? He told me to man up and deal with it. Made me stronger. Jackson remained silent, sensing that anything he said would only escalate the situation. He moved toward the kitchen table, intending to return to his homework, but Michael's voice stopped him. Don't walk away when I'm talking to you. Jackson turned back slowly. I need to finish my science homework. What you need, Michael said, pointing at him with the beer can, is to learn some respect. Your mom's too soft on both of you. No wonder you think you run this place. The comment stung, not because it was true, but because it revealed how little Michael understood about their family. Jackson didn't want to run the place. He wanted his mother to be happy, wanted Violet to feel safe, wanted the stability that had been lacking since their father left. I respect my mom, Jackson said quietly, and I help with Violet because mom works so hard. Something in Michael's expression shifted. So what are you saying? That your mom's not around enough? That she's a bad mother? No, Jackson protested, horrified at the misinterpretation. That's not what I meant at all. Mom's amazing. She does everything for us. Except be here, Michael said, a cruel edge to his words. That's why she has me around now, kid. To fill in the gaps. The implication, that Rachel was somehow failing as a mother, that she needed Michael to complete their family, made anger flare in Jackson's chest. We were fine before you came along, he said, immediately regretting the words. Michael went very still, his face flushing darker. What did you just say to me? Jackson took a step back. Nothing. I'm sorry. No. Say it again. Michael advanced slowly, the beer can crushed in his grip. You think you were fine? Your mom working herself to death. Bills piling up. This dump falling apart around you. He gestured expansively at the apartment. You have no idea what I've done for your family. I'm sorry, Jackson repeated, his back now against the kitchen counter. I shouldn't have said that. Michael loomed over him, close enough that Jackson could smell the beer on his breath. You're damn right you shouldn't have. Your mom's finally got someone who cares about her, who helps out, and all you do is undermine me, make her doubt me. I don't. Shut up, Michael snapped. Just shut your mouth for once. He turned abruptly, stalking back to the couch and dropping heavily onto it. He picked up Rachel's laptop again, his movements jerky with suppressed anger. Jackson stood frozen for several seconds, his heart hammering in his chest. Then, moving as quietly as possible, he returned to the kitchen table and his open textbook. Neither spoke as the minutes ticked by, the only sounds the continuing storm outside and the increasingly forceful typing as Michael worked on the laptop. The relative calm was shattered by a sudden curse from Michael. No, he shouted, causing Jackson to flinch. This piece of junk just crashed again. I lost everything. Jackson watched warily as Michael slammed the laptop closed and stood, pacing the small living room like a caged animal. I've been working on those projections for 3 hours, he fumed. My boss is expecting them first thing tomorrow. Maybe it auto-saved? Jackson suggested hesitantly. Michael whirled on him. You think I don't know how computers work? It didn't save. It's gone. All of it. He ran his hands through his hair, gripping it in frustration. I need a drink. Something stronger than beer. He stalked to the kitchen, opening cabinets until he found what he was looking for. A half-full bottle of whiskey hidden behind the pancake mix. Rachel kept it for emergencies, though Jackson had never seen her drink it. Michael unscrewed the cap and took a long swallow directly from the bottle, grimacing as it went down. The kitchen clock read 9:47 p.m. Jackson calculated how many hours remained until his mother would return home, each minute suddenly seeming like an eternity. I should check on Violet, he said, using the excuse to escape the volatile atmosphere. She's fine, Michael growled. Probably asleep by now. I just want to make sure. Sit down, Michael ordered, taking another drink from the bottle. We need to have a talk, you and me. Jackson reluctantly sat at the kitchen table, his body tense, ready to move if necessary. Michael leaned against the counter, studying him with bloodshot eyes. You know, I've really tried with you, Jackson. Given you space. Been patient. But nothing I do is good enough, is it? That's not true, Jackson said cautiously. Michael gave a bitter laugh. Don't lie to me. I see how you look at me, like I'm some kind of intruder. He took another drink. Your mom and I have been talking about the future, about making this permanent. A cold feeling spread through Jackson's chest. What do you mean? Moving in together. Maybe more than that eventually. Michael's expression was a disturbing mixture of triumph and hostility. Your mom's lonely, needs a partner, and you kids need a father figure. We have a dad, Jackson said before he could stop himself. Michael's face darkened. A dad who walked out and never looks back? Who doesn't even send child support half the time? He pushed off from the counter, moving closer to Jackson. Face it, kid. He's gone. And I'm here now. The sooner you accept that, the better off we'll all be. Jackson looked down at his textbook, the diagrams of rain clouds and water cycles blurring before his eyes. The thought of Michael becoming a permanent part of their lives, having authority over him and Violet, made him feel physically ill. Your sister gets it, Michael continued. She likes me. Kids her age are adaptable. But you, he shook his head. You're the problem here. Always watching. Always judging. I'm not. I said don't lie to me. Michael slammed his hand down on the table, making Jackson jump. You think I don't know you've been hiding my beers? Moving them around in the fridge? Telling your mom I drink too much? Jackson's surprise must have shown on his face because Michael gave a humorless smile. Yeah, she told me. Said you were concerned. Said maybe I should cut back when watching the kids. He mimicked Rachel's voice with cruel accuracy. You turned her against me. Made her doubt me. I'm sorry, Jackson said automatically, though he wasn't. He had indeed expressed concern to his mother, after witnessing how different Michael became after a few drinks. Sorry doesn't cut it. Michael took another long drink from the whiskey bottle, then set it down hard on the counter. You need to understand something. I'm not going anywhere. Your mom needs me. This family needs me. And you, he pointed a finger at Jackson. You need to get with the program. The bedroom door creaked open, and both turned to see Violet standing there in her pajamas, her favorite stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. Why are you yelling? She asked in a small voice. Michael's demeanor changed instantly, his face arranging itself into a mask of contrition. I'm sorry, princess. Did we wake you up? Michael was just frustrated about some work stuff. Nothing for you to worry about. Violet's eyes went to Jackson, seeking reassurance. He forced a smile. It's okay, Vi. Everything's fine. You should go back to bed. I'm thirsty, she said, still hovering in the doorway. And I heard scary noises. That was just the thunder, Jackson explained, standing up. I'll get you more water. As he moved toward the kitchen, Michael intercepted him. I'll get it. You sit down. There was something in Michael's tone that brooked no argument. Jackson slowly sat back down, watching as Michael took Violet's cup and filled it with water from the sink. He crouched down to her level as he handed it to her, his face a perfect picture of concerned affection. There you go, princess. Better. Violet nodded, taking a small sip. Can I sit with you guys for a little bit? I don't like the thunder. Before Jackson could answer, Michael smiled indulgently. Sure thing. Want to see what I'm working on? It's pretty cool grown-up stuff. Violet brightened. Yes, please. Michael led her to the couch, where Rachel's laptop sat closed on the coffee table. He opened it and settled Violet beside him, pointing at the screen as it powered back on. See? I'm making charts that show how businesses can make more money. Violet leaned against his side, seemingly content in his attention. Jackson watched the scene with a mixture of confusion and unease. This was the Michael that Rachel saw. Attentive, patient, kind. The transformation was so complete it almost made Jackson doubt his own perceptions of the previous hour. "Can I show her my school project?" he asked, taking a tentative step toward the couch. "It's about the water cycle. It might help her fall back asleep." Michael gave him a warning look over Violet's head. "We're fine here, buddy. Why don't you finish your homework?" Jackson retreated to the kitchen table, the message clear. "Stay away." For the next 20 minutes, he pretended to read his textbook while keeping a watchful eye on Michael and Violet. The man seemed to have temporarily forgotten his anger, focused instead on explaining his work to the little girl in simplified terms. Violet, naturally curious and eager for attention, asked questions and listened with exaggerated concentration. The scene was so normal, so seemingly innocent, that Jackson began to wonder if he had overreacted. Maybe Michael's earlier behavior was just stress and frustration. Maybe things could work out if Jackson tried harder to accept him. Then Violet reached for her water cup on the coffee table and accidentally knocked it over. Water cascaded across the laptop keyboard, and everything changed in an instant. "No!" Michael shouted, jerking the laptop away. "What did you do?" Violet shrank back, startled by his sudden yell. "I'm sorry. It was an accident." Michael stared in horror as the laptop screen flickered and went dark. "Do you have any idea what you just did? All my work, everything, it's ruined." "I didn't mean to," Violet said, her voice small and trembling. Jackson was already moving, grabbing paper towels from the kitchen and rushing to the coffee table. "Maybe we can dry it off," he suggested, reaching for the laptop. Michael knocked his hand away. "Don't touch it. You've both done enough damage." He set the laptop on the floor and frantically tried to wipe away the water with his shirt sleeve, cursing under his breath. When the screen remained dark, he slammed his hand down on the coffee table, making both children jump. "Stupid, careless kid," he muttered, his eyes fixed on Violet, who was now pressing herself against the back of the couch, tears welling in her eyes. "It was an accident," Jackson said, stepping between them. "She didn't mean to." Michael stood abruptly, towering over Jackson. "Get out of my way. She's just little. I said move." Michael shoved Jackson aside with enough force to send him stumbling into the edge of the coffee table. Pain shot through his hip, but Jackson regained his balance and turned in time to see Michael grab Violet's arm. "You need to learn to be more careful," Michael said, his voice low and dangerous. "You're hurting me," Violet whimpered, trying to pull away. Something inside Jackson snapped. "Let her go," he demanded, his voice stronger than he had ever dared use with Michael. Michael turned to him, still gripping Violet's arm. "What did you say to me?" "I said let her go. You're hurting her." For a moment, time seemed to stop. Jackson could hear the rain pounding against the windows, the sound of his own heart in his ears, Violet's frightened breathing. Then Michael released Violet with a small push that sent her falling back onto the couch. "You don't tell me what to do in this house," he said, advancing on Jackson. "You're a guest here, both of you, living off your mother's charity while she works herself to death. You think you have any right to speak to me like that?" Jackson stood his ground, though every instinct screamed at him to run. "Don't touch my sister again." Michael's face contorted with rage. "Or what? What are you going to do about it, tough guy?" He reached out and gripped Jackson's shoulder, fingers digging painfully into the boy's flesh. "You think you can protect her? You're nothing. A skinny little nobody who needs to learn some respect." "Stop it!" Violet cried from the couch, tears now streaming down her face. "Jackson, make him stop." Michael didn't even look at her. "Your brother can't help you, princess. He can't even help himself." In a desperate move, Jackson brought his foot down hard on Michael's instep. The man howled in pain and released him, stumbling backward. But the momentary advantage was short-lived. Michael's expression transformed into something truly frightening. A cold, calculating fury. "You're going to regret that," he said quietly, flexing his hands. Jackson backed away, moving toward Violet. "I'm sorry. I didn't." "Too late for sorry." Michael lunged forward with surprising speed for someone who had been drinking so heavily. Jackson dodged sideways, positioning himself between Michael and his sister. "Violet, go to our room. Lock the door." But Violet seemed frozen in place, her eyes wide with terror. Michael advanced again, and this time when Jackson tried to evade, his back hit the wall. There was nowhere left to go. "Please," Jackson said, raising his hands. "She didn't mean to spill the water. I shouldn't have stepped on your foot. We're both sorry." Michael's only response was a twisted smile. "Your mom's going to be so disappointed when she hears how you acted tonight. Disrespectful. Violent." He cracked his knuckles. "Maybe you need a lesson about consequences." Violet suddenly found her voice. "Don't hurt him." She scrambled off the couch and rushed forward, putting herself between Michael and her brother, her small arms outstretched. "It was my fault. I spilled the juice." Michael seemed momentarily taken aback by her intervention. Then his expression hardened again. "Get out of the way, Violet. This is between me and your brother." "No," Violet insisted, standing her ground with a bravery that made Jackson's heart swell with pride and fear. "You leave him alone." What happened next occurred so quickly that Jackson would later remember it as a series of disconnected images rather than a fluid sequence. Michael reached down, grasping Violet by the shoulders to move her aside. She resisted, attempting to twist away. Michael's face flushed darker, his patience gone. With a sound of pure frustration, he shoved Violet backward. The force of the push sent her small body flying. She hit the corner of the coffee table with a sickening thud, her head connecting with the wood, before crumpling to the floor. "Violet!" Jackson screamed, dropping to his knees beside her. Blood was already spreading across her temple, soaking into her light brown hair. For a moment no one moved. Michael stood frozen, his face draining of color as he stared at the little girl on the floor. I didn't mean to," he stammered, backing away. Jackson wasn't listening. He gently turned Violet over, his hands shaking. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow. "Vi, wake up. Please wake up." Michael had backed all the way to the door, fumbling for his jacket. "She'll be okay. Just needs an ice pack. Kids hit their heads all the time." "She needs a doctor," Jackson said, tears blurring his vision as he cradled his sister's head. "Call 911. Michael shook his head, jamming his arms into his jacket sleeves. "Can't do that. They'll ask questions. Your mom will lose you both if they think she left you with someone who—" He trailed off, unable to complete the sentence. "Then drive us to the hospital," Jackson pleaded, watching blood continue to seep from the wound on Violet's head. "No hospitals," Michael said, his voice hardening. "Listen to me. She'll be fine. Just clean it up, put some ice on it. I need to go, but I'll be back with your mom later. If you tell anyone what happened, if you say one word about this, they'll take you both away. Put you in foster care. You understand?" Jackson looked up at him in disbelief. "She's bleeding. She won't wake up." "She will. Give her a minute." Michael was at the door now, keys in hand. "Remember what I said. Not a word, or you'll never see your mom again." With that final threat, he was gone, the apartment door slamming behind him. Jackson sat in the sudden silence, holding his unconscious sister, blood warm and sticky between his fingers. The clock on the wall showed 10:22 p.m. His mother wouldn't be home for hours. There was no phone to call for help. Michael had taken his mother's cell phone with him, and the landline had been disconnected last month to save money. "Violet?" he whispered, gently patting her cheek. "Vi, please wake up." She remained still, her breathing shallow but steady. The cut on her temple was about an inch long, still bleeding freely. Jackson had watched enough medical shows with his mother to know head wounds bled a lot, but he also knew head injuries could be serious, could lead to concussions, comas, worse. Moving carefully, he laid Violet's head on a cushion from the couch and ran to the bathroom. He returned with a clean washcloth and pressed it gently against the wound. The white fabric quickly turned red, but the pressure seemed to slow the bleeding. "Vi, you have to wake up," he pleaded, tears running down his face now. "Please, Vi, I need you to wake up." Her eyelids fluttered slightly, and a small moan escaped her lips. Relief washed over Jackson, but it was short-lived. When Violet's eyes opened, they seemed unfocused, unable to fix on his face. "My head hurts," she whispered. "Why is everything spinning?" Jackson had seen enough TV to recognize the signs of a concussion. Violet needed medical attention, but there was no phone, no car, no adult to help. The hospital was on the other side of town, nearly 2 miles away. Outside, the rain continued to pour, punctuated by occasional thunder. For a moment, Jackson felt paralyzed by the enormity of the situation, crushed beneath a weight of responsibility no 9-year-old should have to bear. Then Violet's hand found his, her small fingers cold against his skin. "I'm scared, Jackson," she murmured, her eyes sliding closed again. Something crystallized within him, a clarity of purpose that cut through his fear and uncertainty. There was no one coming to help them. No knight in shining armor, no superhero, no adult to make everything okay. There was only him. "Don't be scared, Vi," he said, his voice steadying. "I'm going to take care of you." Moving with new determination, Jackson went to the closet and pulled out his backpack, dumping his schoolbooks onto the floor. He packed quickly, bandages and antiseptic from the bathroom, a clean washcloth, a small bottle of water, Violet's stuffed rabbit. He grabbed his raincoat and Violet's too, along with a warm blanket from their bed. Returning to his sister, he carefully bandaged her head, using all the first aid knowledge he'd gleaned from watching his mother care for their scrapes and cuts over the years. The bleeding had slowed to a trickle, but the injury still looked serious to his untrained eye. "Vi, I need you to try to stay awake," he said, helping her sit up slightly. "We're going to go get help, but you have to stay with me. Okay?" Violet nodded weakly, wincing at the movement. "Where's Mommy?" "She's at work. But there are doctors who can help you until she gets back." Jackson helped her into her raincoat, then wrapped the blanket around her for extra warmth. "I'm going to carry you." "To the hospital?" Violet asked, her voice small and confused. "It's really far." "Not that far," Jackson lied, forcing confidence into his voice. "And I'm really strong, remember? Like that time I carried you all the way back from the park when you fell off the swing. That had been 3 blocks, not 2 miles, but the reminder seemed to reassure her. With careful movements, Jackson helped Violet onto his back, adjusting her arms around his neck and securing the blanket around them both. He slipped on his backpack, took a deep breath, and headed for the door. The hallway outside their apartment was deserted, the overhead lights flickering slightly with each rumble of thunder. Jackson shifted Violet's weight on his back, making sure she was secure before heading toward the stairwell. Their apartment was on the 3rd floor, and the elevator had been out of order for weeks, just one more broken thing in a building full of them. "Hold on tight, Vi," he whispered as he began the careful descent, one step at a time. Each step sent a jolt of pain through his body, the weight of his sister straining his small frame. But Jackson kept moving, focusing on the rhythm of Violet's breathing against his neck, using it to steady himself. "Keep talking to me, Vi," he said as they reached the 2nd floor landing. "Tell me about your favorite animals." "Rabbits," she murmured, her voice faint. "And dolphins." "What else?" "Butterflies. And lions." Jackson continued the conversation, asking simple questions that required Violet to respond, remembering how his mother had told him once that people with head injuries shouldn't fall asleep. By the time they reached the ground floor, his arms were already aching, but the worst was yet to come. He paused at the building's main entrance, looking out through the glass doors at the deluge beyond. The rain fell in sheets, turning the street into a shallow river. Lightning briefly illuminated the deserted sidewalk, followed seconds later by a crack of thunder that made Violet whimper against his shoulder. "It's okay," Jackson soothed, though his own heart hammered with fear. "It's just noise. Can't hurt us." He zipped his raincoat higher and pulled Violet's hood more securely over her bandaged head. Then, taking a deep breath, he pushed through the door and into the storm. The impact of the rain was immediate and brutal. Despite their raincoats, water quickly began to seep through the fabric, cold against their skin. The wind drove the rain sideways, stinging Jackson's face and making it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. "Jackson," Violet whimpered, her arms tightening around his neck. "I'm cold." "I know, Vi. We'll get warm soon." He adjusted the blanket, trying to create a barrier between his sister and the elements. "Just hold on." Jackson knew the way to Millbrook General Hospital. They had visited the emergency room before, when Violet had a high fever last winter. But knowing the route and traversing it on foot, at night, in a storm, were entirely different matters. He set off down the sidewalk, each step carefully placed to avoid the deeper puddles. The town was eerily quiet, most residents safely indoors on such a miserable night. The few cars that passed splashed additional water onto the sidewalk, their headlights briefly illuminating the small figure carrying his precious burden. "Tell me more animals," Jackson prompted when he felt Violet's grip loosening slightly. "Tigers," she mumbled. "And pandas." "Good. What about birds? What's your favorite bird?" The conversation continued as they made their way down Main Street, past darkened storefronts and the occasional lit window. Jackson's muscles began to scream in protest, his back and shoulders burning with the effort of carrying Violet. But he pushed the discomfort aside, focusing instead on the rhythm of putting one foot in front of the other. Their progress was painfully slow. What would have been a 5-minute drive stretched into an endless journey. After 20 minutes, they had covered less than half the distance to the hospital, and Jackson was forced to stop under the awning of a closed bakery to catch his breath. "Are we there yet?" Violet asked, her words slightly slurred. "Almost," Jackson lied, easing her down to let her stand for a moment while he flexed his cramping arms. "How's your head feeling?" "Hurts," she said simply, swaying slightly on her feet. In the dim light filtering from a street lamp, her face looked alarmingly pale. Jackson crouched down to look at her more closely. "Can you see okay, Vi? Is anything blurry?" She blinked slowly. "Everything's moving funny, and I feel sick." Alarm surged through him. These were bad signs. He knew enough to recognize that. He needed to get her to the hospital faster, but his body was already at its limit. "Just a little longer," he promised, helping her back onto his back. "We'll be there soon, and the doctors will make you feel better." He set off again, forcing his tired legs to move faster despite the protest of his muscles. The rain continued unabated, reducing visibility to just a few yards ahead. At an intersection, Jackson hesitated, momentarily disoriented. The familiar landmarks looked different in the darkness and rain. "This way," he decided, turning right. After a few steps, doubt crept in. Was this the correct route? He tried to picture the path they had driven with their mother, to visualize the turns and streets. A flicker of movement caught his attention. A large dog, possibly a stray, watching them from an alleyway. Its eyes reflected the distant streetlight, giving it a sinister appearance. Jackson quickened his pace, his heart rate accelerating. The dog didn't follow, but the encounter added another layer of fear to an already terrifying journey. "Keep going," he whispered to himself. "Just keep going." The next 20 minutes blurred into a haze of pain, determination, and fear. Jackson's world narrowed to the feel of the wet sidewalk beneath his feet, the weight of Violet on his back, and the distant goal that seemed to recede with each labored step. Twice he had to stop to adjust his grip, his arms trembling with fatigue. Once, he nearly slipped on a slick patch of concrete, barely regaining his balance in time to prevent them both from falling. "Still with me, Vi?" he asked during one such pause, alarmed by her silence. Came the faint response, more a vibration against his shoulder than an actual word. "Stay awake," he urged, panic edging his voice. "We're almost there. Tell me more animals." But Violet's responses were becoming more delayed, her words more mumbled. The realization that she might be slipping into unconsciousness sent a surge of desperate energy through Jackson's exhausted body. "Look, Vi," he said, pointing ahead to where the road curved. "See those lights? That's the hospital. We're nearly there." In reality, they were still several blocks away, but the lie seemed necessary to keep both of them going. Jackson pushed forward with renewed determination, his legs moving mechanically now, beyond pain into a kind of numb persistence. The final stretch was the hardest. The hospital was located at the top of a gentle incline, a hill that might have been insignificant under normal circumstances but now loomed like a mountain. Jackson's breath came in ragged gasps as he forced himself upward, step by painful step. Violet had fallen silent again, her body a dead weight against his back. Jackson called her name repeatedly, but received only the faintest of responses. Fear gave him a final burst of strength as the hospital's emergency entrance finally came into view, its illuminated sign a beacon in the dark night. "We made it, Vi," he gasped, stumbling the last few yards. "We're here. We're safe." The automatic doors slid open as they approached, revealing the bright, sterile interior of the emergency department. Jackson took 3 more steps inside, his vision tunneling, legs finally giving way beneath him. As they collapsed to the floor, he managed to twist his body to protect Violet from the impact. "Help!" he croaked, his voice barely audible over the ambient noise of the ER. "Please help my sister." The last thing Jackson saw before exhaustion claimed him was a flurry of activity. Scrub-clad figures rushing toward them, concerned faces, reaching hands. He surrendered to the darkness with one final thought. He had kept his promise. He had protected Violet. He had brought her to safety. Then the world went black. The fluorescent lights of Millbrook General Hospital's emergency room buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow on the scene unfolding below. Medical staff moved with practiced urgency around the 2 small figures who had collapsed just inside the automatic doors. A boy and a girl, both soaking wet, the girl's head wrapped in a makeshift bandage now stained dark with blood. "Get a gurney over here, stat," called a nurse with salt and pepper hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her name tag read Eleanor, and she had been about to take her break when the children arrived. 25 years in emergency medicine had taught her to recognize serious situations at a glance, and the stillness of the little girl sent alarm bells ringing. Eleanor knelt beside the children, her experienced hands already checking vital signs. The girl was unconscious, her pulse rapid but present, skin cool and clammy to the touch. The boy was conscious but disoriented, his eyes struggling to focus as a young male nurse helped him to sit up. "What happened, honey?" Eleanor asked, her voice gentle but urgent. "What's your name?" "What's her name?" Jackson blinked, reality slowly filtering back through the fog of exhaustion. "I'm Jackson. She's Violet. My sister." His voice was hoarse, barely audible. "She hit her head. She wouldn't wake up properly. I had to bring her." "You did the right thing," Eleanor assured him as a gurney appeared beside them. With practiced efficiency, she and another nurse carefully transferred Violet onto it. "How long ago did this happen?" Jackson tried to concentrate, time having become abstract during their journey. "Maybe an hour? I don't know. We had to walk." Eleanor's eyebrows rose slightly at this, but she kept her voice steady. "You walked here? From where?" "Maple Street Apartments," Jackson replied, trying to stand. His legs buckled immediately, and the male nurse caught him before he hit the floor. "Take it easy," the nurse said, his name tag identifying him as Miguel. "That's nearly 2 miles from here. In this weather." Jackson nodded weakly, his eyes never leaving Violet as the gurney began to move away. "Wait, where are they taking her?" "To examine her," Eleanor explained, motioning for another gurney. "You need to be checked out too, sweetheart." "No, I need to stay with her," Jackson protested, finding strength from somewhere deep within. "She'll be scared if she wakes up alone. I promised I'd take care of her." Something in his desperate plea reached Eleanor. After a quick assessment that his condition, while exhausted, wasn't immediately life-threatening, she nodded to Miguel. "Help him walk. We'll keep them together for now." Miguel supported Jackson as they followed Violet's gurney into a curtained examination area. A doctor was already there, a woman with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, her brown skin contrasting with her white coat. The name embroidered on her coat read Dr. Maya Rivera. "What do we have, Dr. Rivera asked, her hands already gently probing Violet's head injury. 5-year-old female with head trauma, Eleanor reported clinically. Unconscious upon arrival but responding to painful stimuli. Brought in by her brother, who apparently carried her here on foot. Dr. Rivera's eyes flickered briefly to Jackson before returning to her patient. Get the portable CT ready. I want to rule out intracranial bleeding. She spoke with calm authority as she examined Violet's pupils with a penlight. And let's get these wet clothes off both of them. Warm blankets, please. Jackson allowed Miguel to help him onto a chair beside Violet's gurney. His body trembling now with cold and fatigue. Someone draped a warm blanket around his shoulders, but he barely noticed, his attention fixed solely on his sister. Her pupils are reactive but sluggish, Dr. Rivera noted. Probable concussion, possibly moderate to severe. She glanced at Jackson. How long was she unconscious initially? I don't know exactly, Jackson admitted, the guilt crushing. Maybe a few minutes? She woke up but wasn't really. Right? She said everything was spinning and she felt sick. Dr. Rivera nodded. Classic concussion symptoms. And the wound? It was bleeding a lot. I used a clean washcloth and then the bandages from our first aid kit. You did well, Dr. Rivera assured him, her voice softening slightly before she turned back to the nurses. Let's get IV access and start warm fluids. I want her core temperature up. And someone page pediatrics. As the medical team worked around Violet, removing her wet clothes and replacing them with a hospital gown, attaching monitors and inserting an IV line, Jackson sat motionless, fighting against the exhaustion that threatened to overwhelm him. A nurse had placed a blood pressure cuff around his arm and was checking his vitals, but he barely registered the sensation. Your sister is in good hands, Miguel told him gently. Dr. Rivera is one of our best. Now, we need to get you changed into dry clothes too. Can you stand? Jackson nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure. With Miguel's help, he made it to a standing position and was led to a small bathroom adjacent to the examination area. The nurse handed him a set of pediatric scrubs and a hospital gown. Can you manage on your own? Miguel asked. Yes, Jackson replied, though the simple task of changing clothes now seemed monumentally difficult. Once alone in the bathroom, Jackson caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror and barely recognized the pale, haggard face that stared back. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, his clothes soaked through and muddied from their journey. For a moment, the weight of everything that had happened threatened to crush him, and tears welled in his eyes. But Violet needed him to be strong. Wiping his eyes with the back of his hand, Jackson carefully removed his wet clothes and changed into the dry scrubs. The material felt strange against his skin, but the warmth was immediate and welcome. When he emerged from the bathroom, Dr. Rivera was studying images on a computer screen. Violet's CT scan, he realized. The doctor's expression was focused but not alarmed, which Jackson took as a good sign. Good news, Dr. Rivera said when she noticed him. There's no sign of bleeding in the brain, which is what we were most concerned about. Your sister has a concussion and needed 6 stitches for the laceration, but the skull isn't fractured. Relief washed over Jackson, making his knees weak. So she'll be okay? She should recover completely, but we'll need to monitor her closely for the next 24 to 48 hours, the doctor explained. Concussions can be tricky, especially in children. Jackson nodded, moving back to Violet's side. She looked small and vulnerable in the hospital bed, her face pale against the white sheets. An IV line ran into her arm, and the cut on her temple had been neatly stitched and bandaged. Her breathing was steady now, less shallow than before. When will she wake up? He asked. Soon, I expect, Dr. Rivera replied. She's sedated now, but that will wear off. She pulled up a chair beside Jackson. In the meantime, I need to ask you some questions. If that's okay? Jackson tensed. This was the moment he had been dreading. About what happened? Yes, Dr. Rivera said gently. Standard protocol when children come in with injuries. Can you tell me how Violet hurt her head? Jackson stared at his sister's face, Michael's threat echoing in his mind. If you tell anyone what happened, if you say one word about this, they'll take you both away, put you in foster care. She fell, he said finally, the lie bitter on his tongue. We were playing, and she slipped and hit her head on the coffee table. Dr. Rivera's expression remained neutral, but something in her eyes suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. I see. And your parents? Where were they when this happened? Mom was at work. She works 2 jobs. And your father? He left a long time ago. Dr. Rivera made a note on her tablet. So who was watching you and Violet tonight? Jackson's heart hammered in his chest. No one. I watch Violet a lot when Mom has to work. You walked nearly 2 miles in a severe thunderstorm, carrying your sister, Dr. Rivera observed. Why didn't you call an ambulance? Our phone got disconnected, Jackson admitted, this part at least being true. And Mom had her cell phone with her. What about neighbors? Couldn't you ask one of them for help? Jackson looked down at his hands. We don't really know our neighbors. And Mom always says not to bother strangers. Dr. Rivera studied him for a long moment. Jackson, my job is to help Violet get better. To do that, I need to understand exactly what happened. If someone hurt her. No one hurt her. Jackson interrupted, perhaps too quickly. It was an accident. That's all. Before Dr. Rivera could press further, Eleanor appeared at the curtain. Doctor, the mother is here. Jackson's head snapped up. Mom! The curtain parted, and Rachel Hayes rushed in, her face a mask of panic and confusion. She still wore her diner uniform beneath her coat, her hair damp from the rain. Jackson! Oh my God! Violet! She moved to the bed, her hands hovering uncertainly over her daughter's small form. Ms. Hayes. Dr. Rivera stood. I'm Dr. Rivera. Your daughter has a concussion and needed stitches, but the CT scan shows no bleeding or fracture. We expect her to make a full recovery. Rachel nodded distractedly, her eyes fixed on Violet. What happened? The nurse just said there was an accident, that Jackson brought her in. She turned to her son, who had risen from his chair. Where's Michael? He was supposed to be watching you. Before Jackson could answer, a police officer appeared at the curtain. A tall woman with short blonde hair and a grave expression. Dr. Rivera? I'm Officer Larson. Hospital called us about a potential domestic situation involving minors. Rachel's face paled. Domestic situation? What are you talking about? My children had an accident. Dr. Rivera held up a hand. Standard procedure, Ms. Hayes. Given the circumstances, 2 unsupervised children, one with a head injury severe enough to require emergency care, were obligated to notify authorities. Unsupervised. Rachel repeated, her confusion evident. My boyfriend was supposed to be with them. Michael Reynolds. I don't understand. She turned to Jackson. Where's Michael? Jackson swallowed hard, feeling trapped between his mother's desperate gaze, the doctor's clinical assessment, and the police officer's watchful presence. The lie he had prepared felt like ash in his mouth. Jackson? His mother prompted, a note of fear entering her voice. What happened tonight? In that moment, looking at his mother's worn face, the dark circles under her eyes, the worry lines etched deeper by this new crisis, Jackson made a decision. He couldn't add more burden to her shoulders with the truth. Not yet. Vi and I were playing. Michael had to leave for a work emergency. He lied, avoiding her eyes. He said he'd be right back, but then Violet fell and hit her head on the coffee table. I tried to call you, but I couldn't find your phone, and our landline is cut off. She wouldn't wake up properly, so I brought her here. Rachel stared at him, processing his words. Michael left you alone? Without calling me? Her voice rose slightly. And where is he now? As if summoned by her question, a commotion erupted in the hallway outside their curtained area. I'm looking for Rachel Hayes and her kids, a familiar voice demanded. I'm the boyfriend. Where are they? The curtain was yanked aside, and Michael stood there, his hair windblown, clothes disheveled. His eyes widened at the scene before him. Violet in the hospital bed, Jackson standing protectively beside her, Rachel's confused expression, and the police officer turning to face the newcomer. "Rachel!" Michael exclaimed, his voice thick with what sounded like concern. "Thank God I found you. I've been looking everywhere." "Michael!" Rachel moved toward him. "What happened? Why did you leave the children alone?" Michael's face arranged itself into a mask of contrition and concern. "I didn't want to. I got an emergency call from my boss. Server crash, whole system down. I told Jackson I'd be back in 20 minutes tops. I tried calling you but couldn't get through. And you didn't think to take the kids to a neighbor? Or call an ambulance when you got back and found them gone?" Officer Larson interjected, her tone skeptical. Michael turned to her, his expression shifting to defensive indignation. "I was gone for 15 minutes. When I got back, they were both gone. I've been driving all over town looking for them in this storm. Finally thought to check here." He moved to Rachel's side, placing an arm around her shoulders. "I'm so sorry, babe. I never thought Jackson would try to bring her here himself. It was just a little bump. Kids hit their heads all the time. A little bump that required 6 stitches and caused a concussion." "Dar," Rivera noted, her tone neutral but her eyes sharp as they assessed Michael. Something passed across Michael's face too quickly to identify. Anger? Fear? Before his expression settled back into concerned contrition. "I had no idea it was that serious. If I had, I never would have left, not even for my job." Rachel looked between Michael and Jackson, confusion evident in her face. "Jackson, is that what happened? Michael had to leave for work, and then Violet got hurt." Jackson felt every eye in the room on him, Michael's gaze particularly heavy with unspoken threat. He knew that if he told the truth now, everything would change. His mother would be devastated. Michael would deny it. And who would believe a 9-year-old boy over an adult? And Michael's warning about foster care echoed in his mind. What if they did get taken away from their mother? "Yeah," he said quietly, avoiding eye contact with everyone. "That's what happened." Michael's posture relaxed slightly, but Officer Larson's eyes narrowed. "Young man, did anyone hurt your sister? Did anyone hurt you? You can tell us." "No," Jackson replied, the word feeling like a betrayal of Violet. "It was an accident, Dr. Rivera exchanged a glance with Officer Larson, some silent communication passing between them. Then the doctor turned to Rachel. "Ms. Hayes, we need to complete some paperwork. And given the circumstances, there will need to be a report filed with Child Protective Services. CPS. Rachel's voice rose in alarm. "But it was an accident. Standard procedure when a child is injured and there are questions about supervision," Officer Larson explained. "Nothing to worry about if everything checks out." Michael's arm tightened around Rachel. "This is ridiculous. Rachel works 2 jobs to support these kids. One accident, and the system wants to punish her." "No one is punishing anyone, Dr. Rivera said firmly. "We're following protocols designed to protect children." A small sound from the bed drew everyone's attention. Violet's eyelids fluttered, and she moaned softly. Jackson moved immediately to her side, taking her small hand in his. "Vi, it's me. You're okay. We're at the hospital." Violet's eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then finding Jackson's face. "My head hurts," she whispered. "I know, sweetie," he replied, relief washing over him. "But the doctors fixed you up. You're going to be fine." Rachel hurried to the other side of the bed, tears streaming down her face. "Violet, baby, Mommy's here." Violet turned toward her mother's voice. "Mommy?" Her brow furrowed in confusion as she tried to make sense of her surroundings. "Why am I here?" "You had an accident, honey," Rachel explained gently. "You hit your head, but the doctors made you all better." Violet's eyes moved past her mother, landing on Michael, who had positioned himself at the foot of the bed. Immediately, her expression changed. fear flashing across her small features before she turned back to Jackson, her grip on his hand tightening. "Are we safe now?" she whispered. The question clearly meant only for her brother. The simple question hung in the air, loaded with implications that no one could miss. Officer Larson straightened, her attention now fully focused on the interaction. Dr. Rivera moved closer to the bed, her expression carefully neutral but alert. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Rachel asked, confusion evident in her voice. "Of course you're safe." Violet looked uncertainly between her mother and Michael, then back to Jackson. The silent plea in her eyes was unmistakable. She was waiting for her big brother to tell her what to say, to guide her through this confusing situation. Jackson felt trapped in an impossible position. He could continue the lie, protecting his mother from the painful truth, but leaving Violet confused and potentially vulnerable to Michael in the future. Or he could tell the truth now with all its unknown consequences. Officer Larson crouched beside the bed, bringing herself to Violet's eye level. "Violet, can you tell me what happened to your head?" Violet glanced at Jackson again, then at Michael, whose face had hardened into a warning mask that only the children could interpret correctly. The little girl's lip trembled. "I don't remember," she said finally. "That's common with concussions," Dr. Rivera interjected, making a note on her tablet. "Memory loss of the event itself is not unusual." Officer Larson wasn't deterred. "Violet, why did you ask your brother if you were safe now? Were you afraid of something or someone?" Michael stepped forward. "She's obviously confused. The kid has a concussion, for crying out loud. And she's 5. You can't expect her to understand what she's saying right now." "Mr. Reynolds, please let Violet answer," Officer Larson said firmly. All eyes turned to the little girl in the hospital bed. Violet's gaze found Jackson's again, seeking guidance. In that moment, something broke inside him, the weight of protection too heavy to bear, the truth too important to hide. "It's okay, Vi," he said softly. "You can tell the truth. No one will hurt you anymore." Michael's face darkened. "What are you talking about?" "Jackson, don't start making up stories." "Mr. Reynolds, please step back," Officer Larson ordered, moving to position herself between Michael and the children. Rachel looked between her boyfriend and her son, confusion and the beginning of fear dawning on her face. "Jackson? What's going on?" Jackson took a deep breath, his decision made. Michael pushed Violet. She spilled juice on Mom's laptop and he got angry. He pushed her, and she hit her head on the coffee table. Then he left. "He took your phone and threatened that if we told anyone, they'd take us away from you and put us in foster care." The room fell silent, the only sound the steady beep of Violet's heart monitor. Rachel's face drained of color as she stared at Michael in horror. "Is this true?" "Of course not," Michael protested, but his eyes darted toward the exit. "The kid's lying. He never liked me. He's making this up." "He hurt Jackson too," Violet said suddenly, her small voice cutting through the tension. "He grabbed him really hard and said mean things. I tried to make him stop, and he pushed me." Tears welled in her eyes. "I just wanted him to not hurt Jackson." "You little—" Michael started, taking a step toward the bed before Officer Larson intercepted him. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm going to need you to step outside with me," she said, her hand moving to the radio at her shoulder. "This is insane. Rachel, you can't believe this. They're making it up." Rachel stood frozen for a moment, looking between her children and the man she had trusted. Then something hard settled in her expression. "Get away from my children," she said, her voice low but firm. "Rachel? You heard her?" Officer Larson said, now positioning herself directly in front of Michael. "Step outside. Now." For a tense moment it seemed Michael might refuse. Then, with a final venomous glance at Jackson, he turned and stormed out of the curtained area, Officer Larson following closely behind. As soon as he was gone, Rachel collapsed into the chair beside Violet's bed, her body shaking with silent sobs. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." Jackson stood awkwardly, unsure what to do. Dr. Rivera placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. You did the right thing, Jackson. A very brave thing. What's going to happen now? He asked, his voice small. Officer Larson will take Mr. Reynolds into custody. Dr. Rivera explained. There will be reports and probably some interviews with social workers. But your sister is safe, and so are you. That's what matters most right now. Rachel looked up, her face streaked with tears. Are they going to take my children away from me? Dr. Rivera's expression softened. That's not my decision to make, Ms. Hayes. But from what I can see, you have a son who was willing to carry his sister 2 miles through a thunderstorm to get her help. That speaks volumes about how he's been raised. Rachel reached out, pulling Jackson into a fierce hug. I had no idea, she choked out. I swear I didn't know he was like that. I would never have left you with him if I'd known. I tried to tell you, Jackson whispered against her shoulder. You didn't want to listen. Rachel pulled back, holding him at arm's length, her expression devastated by the truth of his words. You're right. I didn't want to see it. I wanted so badly to believe we had someone to help us. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Can you ever forgive me? Before Jackson could answer, Violet's small voice interrupted. Mommy, I'm really tired. Rachel immediately turned her attention to her daughter, smoothing the hair back from her forehead with a trembling hand. Then rest, baby. We'll be right here when you wake up. Dr. Rivera checked Violet's vital signs once more. She needs rest now. The sedation is still in her system, and sleep is actually good for concussion recovery. I'll have the nurses set up a cot for you both to stay overnight. As the doctor left, closing the curtain behind her, the small family found themselves alone for the first time since the ordeal began. Violet's eyes were already drifting closed, her small hand still clasping Jackson's. Jackson, Rachel said softly, what you did tonight, carrying Violet all that way. She shook her head, seemingly unable to find adequate words. I had to, he replied simply. She needed help, and there was no one else. The truth of that statement hung heavy in the air between them, the reality that Jackson, at 9 years old, had been forced to assume a burden no child should bear. In his mother's eyes, he could see the dawning recognition of just how much responsibility he had shouldered, how much he had been forced to grow up before his time. Things will be different now, Rachel promised, her voice strengthening with resolve. I'm going to do better, be better, for both of you. Jackson nodded, wanting to believe her but wary of promises made in moments of crisis. He had heard similar words before, usually after his father's outbursts, before the man had finally left them altogether. I'm really tired, Mom, he said instead of responding directly. Of course you are, sweetheart. Here, lie down beside Violet. There's room. With his mother's help, Jackson climbed onto the hospital bed beside his sister, careful not to disturb her or the IV line in her arm. His body ached from the journey, muscles protesting even this gentle movement. As he settled beside Violet, her small form automatically curled toward him, seeking the security she had always found in her big brother's presence. Rachel pulled the blanket over both of them, then sat in the chair beside the bed, her hand resting on Jackson's arm. I'm not leaving, she assured him. Not for a minute. Jackson wanted to stay awake, to remain vigilant as he had been for so long, but exhaustion claimed him swiftly. As he drifted toward sleep, he felt some of the invisible weight lift from his small shoulders. Not all of it, not yet, but enough to allow him to rest. Outside the curtained area, the hospital continued its nightly rhythms, the murmur of voices, the beep of monitors, the squeak of rubber-soled shoes on linoleum. Within their small enclosure, 3 damaged people began the tentative first steps toward healing, the journey still uncertain but no longer faced alone in the darkness. As sleep finally claimed him, Jackson's last conscious thought was a realization. Sometimes the hardest journey wasn't measured in miles walked through a storm, but in the courage to speak a truth that could change everything. Morning arrived at Millbrook General Hospital with the gradual brightening of light through the half-drawn blinds. Jackson woke disoriented, momentarily confused by the unfamiliar surroundings, the antiseptic smell, the rhythmic beeping of monitors, the narrow bed with its stiff white sheets. Then everything rushed back. Michael's rage, Violet's injury, the desperate journey through the storm, and finally, the truth spilling out in this very room. He turned carefully to check on Violet, who still slept beside him, her small face peaceful now, the bandage on her temple stark white against her skin. On the other side of the bed, Rachel had fallen asleep in the visitor's chair, her body contorted uncomfortably, one hand still resting on the mattress near her children. Jackson eased himself into a sitting position, wincing at the stiffness in his muscles. Every part of him ached. His back, his shoulders, his legs, testament to the physical ordeal he had endured. But the invisible weight that had pressed on him for months felt lighter somehow, as if speaking the truth about Michael had relieved a burden he hadn't fully acknowledged. A gentle knock at the door preceded Eleanor, the night nurse who had helped them upon arrival. She smiled when she saw Jackson awake. "Good morning," she said softly, moving to check Violet's vital signs. "How are you feeling?" "Sore," Jackson admitted. "But okay." Eleanor nodded as if this was exactly the answer she'd expected. "Not surprising. You pushed your body to its absolute limit last night. Most grown men couldn't have done what you did." The simple acknowledgement of his effort brought unexpected tears to Jackson's eyes, which he quickly blinked away. Eleanor pretended not to notice, focusing instead on recording Violet's pulse and temperature. "Your sister had a good night," she reported. "Dr. Rivera will be in shortly to check on her, but all her signs are stable." "When can we go home?" Jackson asked, though the thought of returning to the apartment where everything had happened filled him with apprehension. Eleanor's expression softened with sympathy. "That's not my decision to make, honey. There are some people who need to talk to you and your mom first." As if summoned by these words, Rachel stirred in her chair, wincing as she straightened her cramped limbs. She looked years older than she had just yesterday, dark circles shadowing her eyes, new lines of worry etched around her mouth. "Jackson," she murmured, reaching out to touch his arm as if reassuring herself he was really there. "You're awake. How do you feel?" "I'm okay, Mom." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "You were so brave. Both of you." She looked at Violet, still sleeping peacefully. "I never should have." Her voice broke, unable to complete the thought. Eleanor discreetly finished her checks and slipped out, leaving mother and son in a moment of fragile privacy. "It wasn't your fault," Jackson said after a long silence. "You didn't know what he was really like." Rachel wiped at her eyes. "But I should have. I should have listened when you tried to tell me you were uncomfortable around him. I was just so." She trailed off, searching for the right word. "Lonely," Jackson offered, revealing an understanding beyond his years. His mother looked at him with a mixture of surprise and sorrow. "Yes, and tired of doing everything alone. But that's no excuse for putting you in danger." Before Jackson could respond, Violet stirred beside him, her eyelids fluttering open. For a moment, confusion clouded her face. Then her gaze settled on Jackson, and she relaxed visibly. "Morning, Vi," he said, smiling at her. "Where are we?" she asked, her voice small and slightly raspy. "In the hospital, remember? You got hurt, but the doctors fixed you up." Recognition dawned in her eyes, along with the shadow of fear. "Is the bad man gone?" Rachel leaned forward, gently stroking Violet's hair. "Yes, baby. Michael is gone, and he's never coming back. I promise." Violet seemed to consider this, her 5-year-old mind processing complex events with straightforward logic. Good. He was mean to Jackson. Rachel and Jackson exchanged a glance over Violet's head, a silent acknowledgement of how much had been hidden from both of them. "Were you scared?" Violet asked suddenly, looking up at her brother. "When you carried me in the rain?" Jackson considered the question seriously. "A little," he admitted. "But I was more worried about getting you help." "You're the bravest person in the whole world," Violet declared with absolute conviction, snuggling closer to him. Before anyone could respond, the door opened again, and Dr. Rivera entered, accompanied by a woman in a gray pantsuit who carried a leather portfolio. "Good morning, dear." Rivera greeted them. "I'm glad to see everyone awake. Violet, how are you feeling today?" "My head hurts a little," Violet replied honestly. "But not as bad as before, dear." Rivera nodded, approaching the bed to examine her. "That's normal. The pain should keep getting better." She checked Violet's pupils, then gently probed the area around the stitches. "Everything looks good. The concussion symptoms are resolving well." Rachel straightened in her chair. "Does that mean she can go home?" "Medically speaking, she could be discharged later today, as long as someone will be monitoring her closely for the next 48 hours. Dear," Rivera explained. She turned to introduce the woman beside her. "This is Ms. Daniels from Child Protective Services. She needs to speak with you all as part of the mandatory reporting process." Rachel tensed visibly, her hand finding Jackson's on the bed. Ms. Daniels stepped forward, her expression professional but not unkind. "Ms. Hayes, I'd like to speak with you privately first, and then with each of the children. Standard procedure in cases like this." Jackson felt his mother's grip tighten momentarily before she released his hand and stood. "Of course." She turned to her children. "I'll be right back. Everything's going to be okay." As Rachel followed Ms. Daniels out of the room, Dr. Rivera approached Jackson. "While they're talking, let's get you checked out properly. You were quite exhausted last night, and I want to make sure there's no lasting damage from your heroic journey." "I'm not a hero," Jackson protested quietly. "I just did what I had to do." Dr. Rivera's expression was gentle but serious. "Jackson, you carried your sister nearly 2 miles through a thunderstorm to get her medical attention. That goes well beyond what most people would consider possible, especially for someone your age." She helped him off the bed, careful of his sore muscles. "That's the definition of heroism in my book." While a resident doctor stayed with Violet, Dr. Rivera led Jackson to a small examination room where she checked him thoroughly, testing his reflexes, examining his muscles and joints, listening to his heart and lungs. "Remarkably, you've escaped with nothing worse than significant muscle strain and fatigue," she concluded, helping him back into the hospital scrubs. "Your body will be sore for several days, but there's no permanent damage. Physically, at least." She paused, her expression becoming more serious. "Jackson, can I ask you something?" He nodded, sensing what was coming. "How long had Michael been difficult with you?" Jackson stared at his hands. "Almost since he started dating Mom. Not right away, but pretty soon after." "And last night wasn't the first time he was physically aggressive?" "No. He'd grabbed me before, pushed me a little. Nothing like last night, though." Dr. Rivera nodded, making a note in her tablet. "Why didn't you tell your mother sooner?" It was the question that had haunted Jackson through the night, that would likely continue to haunt him for a long time to come. "I tried, kind of. But she seemed so happy sometimes and so tired all the time. And Michael was always different when she was around. I thought maybe I was making too big a deal out of it." He looked up at the doctor. "And I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "That she wouldn't believe me. That she'd choose him. That he'd get angry and hurt her too." The admission cost him, each word extracted painfully from the place deep inside where he had buried his fears. Dr. Rivera's expression remained neutral, but there was compassion in her eyes. "Those are very adult concerns for someone your age." Jackson shrugged slightly. "I've had to grow up fast." "Yes," the doctor agreed quietly. "I can see that you have." When they returned to Violet's room, they found Ms. Daniels sitting beside the bed, engaged in what appeared to be a casual conversation with the little girl about her favorite animals. Rachel stood by the window, her posture tense but her expression controlled. "Ah, Jackson," Ms. Daniels said, looking up. "I was hoping to speak with you next, if that's all right?" He nodded and Ms. Daniels suggested they go to the small waiting area just down the hall. As they walked, Jackson glanced back to see his mother sitting beside Violet, stroking her hair with a trembling hand. The waiting area was empty at this early hour, the morning sun streaming through large windows that overlooked the hospital parking lot. Ms. Daniels gestured for Jackson to sit on one of the cushioned chairs, then took the seat opposite him. "First, let me say how impressed I am by what you did last night," she began, her tone warm but professional. "That took extraordinary courage and determination." Jackson shifted uncomfortably at the praise. "I just want Violet to be okay." "I understand." Ms. Daniels opened her portfolio and removed a notepad. "I need to ask you some questions about what happened, and about your home life in general. Is that okay?" For the next 45 minutes, Jackson answered her questions as honestly as he could, about Michael's behavior over the past months, about the events of the previous night, about his mother's work schedule and their living situation. Ms. Daniels took notes throughout, occasionally asking him to clarify or elaborate on certain points. "Jackson, do you feel safe at home when it's just you, your sister, and your mother?" she asked finally. "Yes," he replied without hesitation. "Mom would never hurt us. She works really hard to take care of us. It's not her fault she has to work so much." Ms. Daniels nodded, making another note. "And before Michael, was there anyone else in your mother's life who made you feel unsafe?" Jackson thought about his father. His unpredictable moods, the shouting matches with his mother, the way he would sometimes disappear for days at a time. But he had never physically hurt Jackson or Violet, at least not intentionally. "Our dad wasn't great," he admitted. "But he never did anything like Michael. He just wasn't around much and then he left for good." "I see." Ms. Daniels closed her notepad. "Thank you for being so honest with me, Jackson. It helps us determine how best to support your family moving forward. Are you going to take us away from Mom?" The question that had been tormenting him finally escaped, his voice barely above a whisper. Ms. Daniels' expression softened. "That's not my goal here. From what I've observed and what you've told me, your mother loves you very much and has been doing her best in difficult circumstances. She made a serious error in judgment regarding Michael, but she appears genuinely committed to ensuring nothing like this ever happens again." Relief washed over Jackson, so intense he felt momentarily lightheaded. "So we can go home with her?" "There will be some conditions," Ms. Daniels explained. "Regular check-ins with a caseworker, family counseling, and a safety plan for supervision when your mother is working. But yes, barring any new information, my recommendation will be for the family to remain together with appropriate support services." When they returned to Violet's room, they found Dr. Rivera explaining discharge instructions to Rachel, who was listening intently, nodding occasionally. "Bed rest for at least the next 2 days, the doctor was saying. Limited screen time, no physical exertion, and bring her back immediately if she experiences increased headache, vomiting, unusual drowsiness, or confusion. We'll take good care of her," Rachel promised, her voice steadier than it had been earlier. Ms. Daniels approached, giving Rachel an encouraging smile. "I've completed my initial assessment. We'll need to arrange a home visit and set up services, but I see no reason why the children can't be discharged to your care today." The relief on Rachel's face was palpable. "Thank you. I swear, nothing like this will ever happen again." "I believe you," Ms. Daniels replied sincerely, "but you're going to need support. Being a single parent working 2 jobs is incredibly challenging, and it's important to establish a reliable, safe network for when you can't be home." While the adults continued their conversation, Jackson moved to Violet's bedside. She looked up at him with trust that both warmed and terrified him, the absolute faith that he would always protect her, always keep her safe. "Are we going home?" she asked. "Soon," he assured her, taking her small hand in his. "How's your head feeling?" "Better. The doctor said I'm being very brave." She lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "But not as brave as you." Jackson smiled, a genuine smile that felt strange on his face after the events of the past 24 hours. "We're both pretty brave, I think." By early afternoon, the discharge process was complete. Violet had been thoroughly examined one final time, prescriptions had been written for pain medication, and follow-up appointments had been scheduled. Since their clothes from the previous night were still damp and muddy, the hospital provided clean replacements from their donation closet. Slightly too large for both children, but warm and dry. Officer Larson returned briefly to update them on Michael's situation. He had been arrested and charged with child endangerment and assault. There would be a court date, and both children might need to testify, though efforts would be made to minimize their involvement in the legal proceedings. "He won't be able to hurt you again," Officer Larson assured them. "There's a protective order in place, and he's currently in custody." As they prepared to leave, Eleanor appeared with a wheelchair for Violet, hospital policy for all discharged patients regardless of their ability to walk. "Your chariot awaits, Princess Violet," she announced with a theatrical bow that made the little girl giggle. Rachel gathered their few belongings while Jackson helped Violet into the wheelchair. Dr. Rivera entered with final discharge papers, which Rachel signed with a slightly trembling hand. "You've been given prescriptions for pain relief and contact information for pediatric neurology," the doctor reminded them. "The follow-up appointment is scheduled for 5 days from now, but call sooner if anything concerns you." Rachel nodded, tucking the paperwork into her purse. "Thank you for everything, for taking such good care of my children." "That's our job, dear," Rivera replied with a smile. "But it's been a privilege to meet such an extraordinary family." She crouched down to Jackson's eye level. "Especially you, young man. I hope you know how special what you did was." Jackson looked down, uncomfortable with the attention but secretly pleased by the recognition. "I just did what I had to do," he repeated. "And that, Dr. Rivera said, straightening up, "is what makes it extraordinary." Eleanor wheeled Violet toward the elevator, with Rachel and Jackson following closely behind. As they descended to the ground floor, Jackson noticed his mother's nervous expression. "What's wrong, Mom?" Rachel sighed softly. "I called my boss at the diner, explained what happened. She's giving me 3 days off, which is good. But after that," she shook her head, "I don't know how we're going to manage. I can't leave you two alone, but I can't afford to lose either job." Before Jackson could respond, the elevator doors opened into the hospital lobby. To their surprise, a small group of people stood waiting. Mrs. Bennett, Jackson's science teacher, Mr. Edwards, the manager of their apartment building, and several neighbors Jackson recognized from their floor. "There they are," Mrs. Bennett exclaimed, stepping forward. "Oh, Rachel, we've been so worried." Rachel stopped in confusion. "What are you all doing here?" Mrs. Bennett embraced her warmly. "Word travels fast in a small town like Millbrook. When we heard what happened, what Jackson did to save Violet, we knew we had to help." Mr. Edwards stepped forward. His usually gruff demeanor softened with concern. "We've set up a schedule, Rachel. People from the building taking turns to be with the kids when you're at work. All responsible adults, all background checked because of their jobs. And the school is arranging for counseling services for both children," Mrs. Bennett added. "Free of charge." Rachel's hand went to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," Mrs. Bennett assured her. "This is what community is for, to step in when someone needs help." Mr. Edwards handed Rachel a set of keys. "And we've moved you to a different apartment. First floor, other side of the building from where it happened. Thought the kids might not want to go back there right away. Everything's been moved over. It's all ready for you." Rachel stared at the keys in her hand, then at the faces of people she had barely known until today. Neighbors she had been too busy or too tired to properly meet, colleagues of her children's teachers, members of a community she hadn't realized was there all along. "Thank you," she whispered, the words wholly inadequate for the gratitude overwhelming her. "I don't know how we can ever repay." "No repayment necessary," Mr. Edwards interrupted gruffly. "Just part of being neighbors." He glanced at Jackson with something like respect in his eyes. "Besides, we owe this young man. Shows us all what courage really looks like." Jackson felt his face grow warm, but a small part of him, the part that had carried Violet through the storm, that had finally spoken the truth despite his fear, stood a little straighter at the recognition. Outside, the day was clear and bright, the storm of the previous night having blown away, leaving behind freshly washed streets and a sky of perfect blue. As they walked toward Mrs. Bennett's car, which she had offered to drive them home in, Jackson felt the warmth of the sun on his face. The journey ahead would not be easy. There would be police interviews and court dates, therapy sessions and difficult conversations. There would be nightmares likely for all of them. The road to healing would be long and sometimes painful. But as he helped Violet into the car, catching her smile of absolute trust, Jackson knew they would not be walking that road alone anymore. The invisible weight he had carried for so long was now shared, not just with his mother, who had wrapped an arm protectively around his shoulders, but with a community that had seen their need and stepped forward to help. The car pulled away from the hospital, carrying them toward a home that would feel both familiar and strange. A new beginning constructed from the ashes of what had been broken. Jackson looked back at the building where their lives had changed, where truth had finally emerged from shadows, where help had come at last. And somewhere deep within him, a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, it was okay to be 9 years old again. Not yet, perhaps, and not entirely, but someday soon. 6 months had passed since the stormy night when Jackson Hayes carried his sister 2 miles to safety. Spring had come to Millbrook, bringing with it new beginnings that seemed especially fitting for the Hayes family. Jackson sat on a bench outside Millbrook Elementary School, watching as Violet played with classmates on the playground. Her laughter carried across the schoolyard, uninhibited and free in a way that had taken months of healing to recover. The scar on her temple had faded to a thin white line, barely visible unless you knew to look for it. The invisible scars had taken longer to heal, but weekly sessions with Dr. Winters, their therapist, had helped both children process their trauma. "Ready to go, kiddo?" Rachel approached, having finished her shift at the community center, where she now worked as an administrative assistant. The position paid less than her 2 previous jobs combined, but the regular hours and supportive environment had proven invaluable for their family's recovery. Jackson nodded, waving to catch Violet's attention. As his sister ran toward them, pigtails bouncing, he reflected on the changes the past months had brought. Michael had pled guilty to avoid a trial, sparing the children from having to testify. He was serving a 2-year sentence with a permanent restraining order in place. The knowledge that he was far away had gradually allowed Jackson to relax his vigilance, to surrender some of the responsibility he had carried for so long. "Guess what?" Violet exclaimed as she reached them. "Ms. Patterson said my drawing is going in the school art show." "That's wonderful, sweetheart." Rachel beamed, taking her daughter's hand. "We'll make sure everyone comes to see it." Everyone had come to mean something different now. Their support network had expanded beyond anything Jackson could have imagined that night in the hospital. Mrs. Bennett still checked in regularly, often bringing science books that fed Jackson's growing interest in astronomy. Mr. Edwards had become something of a grandfather figure, teaching Jackson basic carpentry on weekend afternoons. Neighbors who had once been strangers now formed a reliable safety net for the family. As they walked home together through the tree-lined streets of Millbrook, Jackson noticed how much easier his mother moved now, the perpetual tension in her shoulders having eased with time and support. The therapy sessions had been for her as well, helping her work through the guilt and self-recrimination that had initially threatened to overwhelm her. "Don't forget we have group tonight," Rachel reminded them as they approached their apartment building. The children's support group at the community center had become an unexpected source of healing. Initially reluctant to speak about his experience, Jackson had gradually found his voice among peers who understood trauma in ways most adults couldn't. Last week, for the first time, he had shared the full story of that rainy night. Not just the physical journey, but the fear, the determination, the moment when he decided truth was more important than protection. Their apartment, though in the same building as before, felt nothing like the one where they had lived with Michael's threatening presence. Sunlight streamed through windows adorned with Violet's artwork. Books filled shelves that Mr. Edwards had built. A telescope, a gift from Jackson's classmates when they learned of his fascination with stars, stood beside the window, pointed toward the heavens. That evening, as they walked hand in hand to the community center for their group session, Jackson realized something profound. The 2-mile journey he had made 6 months ago had been just the beginning of a much longer path. One of healing, of rebuilding trust, of learning to be a child again, while honoring the strength he had discovered within himself. The community center came into view, its lights warm and welcoming against the deepening twilight. Inside, other children and parents waited, each carrying their own invisible burdens, each walking their own path toward healing. "You know what, Jackson?" Violet said suddenly, squeezing his hand. "I'm not scared anymore." Jackson looked down at his sister's upturned face, at the trust and love shining in her eyes, and felt a corresponding lightness in his own heart. "Me neither, Vi," he replied, and was surprised to discover it was true. Together, the Hayes family climbed the steps to the community center, no longer alone, no longer carrying weights too heavy for their shoulders. The journey wasn't over. Perhaps it never would be completely, but with each step forward, the distance between who they had been and who they were becoming grew a little shorter, a little less daunting. As they entered the building, greeted by name and welcomed with genuine warmth, Jackson thought about courage. Not the desperate, adrenaline-fueled courage of that stormy night, but the quieter courage of each day since, the courage to trust again, to speak truth, to accept help, to heal. Some journeys measured their distance in miles. Others, he had learned, measured it in moments of quiet triumph, in burdens shared, in hands held tight through dark times and bright ones alike. In the end, perhaps those were the journeys that mattered most. Jackson Hayes, no longer carrying the weight of the world on his 9-year-old shoulders, stepped forward into the light, his family beside him, his future, for the first time in a very long time, full of stars rather than shadows.